one of the pluses of COVID time is that we don't travel. So we don't have to pack anything. I hate packing. It's not that I'm a big traveler, but I hate packing because it involves deciding, choosing the right things. And my problem is I want to have every right thing for every possible situation, so I always end up bringing way too much stuff I don't need. I want to have enough of the right stuff, no matter what. You have the same issue? Tom doesn't. Melissa does, okay. Tom shook his head over there, yes. It's probably more of an American problem than anyone else's because of our love affair with stuff. But it is also a biblical problem, it seems, as well, in one sense anyway. We hear this story today. It's a wedding, preparations for a wedding. And the bridesmaids, there are 10 of them, and they come to the bride's home, and they wait with her for the groom to arrive, and when he arrives, then they will all process to his home. His parents' home may be the same home, and there the ceremony will happen, and the celebration, and the banquet, and the dance, and all the festivities will happen there. But in this case, the groom is not showing up when he's expected to show up. What do you think this story is about? It's really less of a parable and more of an allegory. But what do you think it's about? I think it's about the delay in the second coming, the return of Christ. This is an early church story. And I frankly think it's more of a Matthew story than a Jesus story. Jesus tells this story in Matthew's gospel, not to the crowds that he has been addressing in the area around the temple for several weeks where we were listening to him, engaged with him. Now he and his disciples have gone off out of the city up to the Mount of Olives, and it's quiet, and it's just his inner circle that he's speaking to. And he tells this story in part in response to a question one of them asked as they're leaving the city, as they're leaving the temple. And they're remarking about how beautiful it is, and he said, it's all coming down. It's all coming down. And by the time that Matthew writes his gospel, the temple has been destroyed 10, maybe 15 years earlier. So Jesus is responding to the question about, well, when is the end coming? When will this happen? And he lists a whole bunch of things in the previous chapter, all these things that will happen prior to this moment of the coming of the realm of God. So don't be distracted by those other things. But when all of that happens, then this will occur. Now, there's a couple of details to maybe keep in mind that I find interesting. One was one that Gene Miller pointed out in our Bible study on Tuesday. If you listen to the story, you think, well, there are the wise bridesmaids, 5 of them, and the foolish ones. There are no B, C, or D students in the class. It's either you get an A or you get an F. That's all it is. And the wise are wise. Why? Because they bring extra stuff. They bring extra oil to keep their lamps burning in case there's an extended wait. And the foolish ones, the fools, the morai, the Greek word is morai, and one of the commentators just goes on and talks about the morons. The morons don't bring any extra. And that's the difference between wise and foolish. A second detail that strikes me as interesting, too, is the way the story is introduced. And in the NRSV, it says, then the kingdom of heaven will be like this. And the story then is told. Well, then, or as Chris's version, the NIV, says, at that time, which is maybe more accurate. After all these things have happened that Jesus talks about, then at that time, this realm will break into our realm, and it will look like this. It'll be like this. But the Greek is less definite. It's more passive and a little more ambiguous. It's a little softer. And so it would be better translated to say, at that time, the realm of heaven, of God, will come, and it might look something like this. This is one of the stories that is out there. It's in social media. You'll read it on Facebook and Twitter. It's there. It's not necessarily the endorsed one, but it's one that's there. And there's a lot of discussion about what this is going to look like when it happens, and a lot of disagreement. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? So this is just one of the stories, and here's the story. This story goes like this. There are these bridesmaids that are waiting for the groom to come. The groom is delayed. His car broke down. Blew a gasket. We don't know. And he doesn't call because he didn't charge his cell phone. So they don't know what's going on, and he's delayed, and he's walking, and he can't call for a ride, and it takes forever. And it's November, so sun sets at like 5 o'clock, and this is like 11 at night. They've been waiting since, 3 in the afternoon. So they're wiped out. It's chilly. They got blankets around them. They all go to sleep. They all go to sleep. Nobody stays awake. Now note, at the end of the story, it says, therefore, stay awake. Be on guard. Watch, because you don't know when this will happen. The conclusion doesn't work with the story because everybody goes to sleep. We all go to sleep. We all have to go to sleep. But do we wake up? What wakes us up? Are we awake now, or are we sleepwalking? And that's a good question for any of us any day of the week. Am I awake, or am I just passing through? So they wake up when somebody comes and says, he's almost here, he's coming, get yourselves ready, come on out. And that's when they part company, the foolish and the wise. Because even though they're foolish, they still realize, hey, we're running out of oil. Our lamps are flickering, they're going out. Because we've been waiting so long, we even had them burning low, but we've used up all the oil. Well, you have extra. Would you share with us? And the answer is, no. Go get your own. We might not have enough for ourselves. We might run out. That's the tone of voice I hear in this. Go get your own. And what time is it now? Midnight. Which is a perfect time to go shopping, right? Yeah, exactly. But to the foolish, this seems like a wise plan. Oh, sure, we'll just go buy some. And so off they go. Midnight is what? It's when the old day ends and the new day begins. That's what the story is about. There's a new day that's going to dawn, and we have tipped over into this new day. And so at the very point where this new day begins, the foolish women go off to participate in an economic system that itself is part of the old day and the old way and is on its way out. That's what's foolish about them. And that may be one of the meanings of the story. As soon as they're gone, who shows up? The groom. And the 5 who are left, the 5 wise ones who brought extra oil, who brought extra stuff, they're waiting, and they all join him with the bride, and away they go, and they go inside, and the wedding starts, they close the door, it's locked, and the others are left out. Because, as we all know, if you snooze, you lose. But wait, everybody snoozed. It's not the snoozing that's the problem. It's the waking up, and it's knowing what to do when you wake up. And as the story tells us, apparently, if you bring extra oil, you're good to go. You just got to bring lots of stuff. You got to bring extra stuff in case there's an extended wait. Okay. If you bring enough oil to keep it going, to keep the darkness at bay, what's the oil? What is it, actually? And we went round and round on Tuesday morning about this one, too. What's that mean? We kind of know who the people are in the story, but what's the oil? Well, one interpretation is that it's acts of faithful discipleship. This is an early church story, so we got to push that. We're looking for faithful disciples who are doing the right thing. That's what wins people over. That's what brings people in. So if you do enough good stuff and fill your tank with those things, then you'll get in. Well, that's not a problem, is it? We just all do lots of good stuff and make sure that we're ready to go. Are you ready to go? Have you done enough good stuff? Because apparently, you're burning it up as you're sitting here waiting. So maybe you better get out there right now and do some more good things and fill your tank. Gather some more holy points so you're sure that you're covered. And what happens then if while you're out doing that, he shows up? Ruh-roh. Troubling story. Troubling story. It's not one of my favorites. And it's not one of the necessarily endorsed. The realm of heaven, some think, will be like this. It's out there. Will it really? Will it really? Alan Rabinowitz stuttered terribly as a child, so profoundly that he could not speak to other people. He could not express himself verbally. The sounds wouldn't stop. He couldn't form them. He couldn't shape them. It was just a profound impediment for him. But, interestingly enough, he could talk fluidly to animals. And he had several pets, like a guinea pig and a turtle and a goldfish and something else. And he would sometimes take them into his closet in the dark, and he'd close the door. And very quietly, he would talk to his animals as a child and tell them what was going on in the world and tell them stories and tell them what he was feeling and what was happening with him and how hard this was. He also would go to the zoo in Brooklyn and talk to the animals there. Now, not when other people were around, but when it was just him and them, and the primates and the big cats especially. And there was a jaguar in a cage. And you remember maybe you went to the zoo years ago and how animals used to be kept. I remember the Como Zoo and the big cats, and they were just in these small cages, and they would just pace back and forth. And there was nothing for them. It was horrendous. Well, he saw this jaguar, and it just killed him that this beautiful animal was caged like this. And looking into its eyes, it was like there was really hardly any life there at all. It was barely light. And he, at one point, promised this big cat that he was going to do something someday so that creatures like him would not have to live like this, would have a place and could live out their lives the way they were intended to live, wild and free and beautiful. Well, his parents struggled with him and his stuttering. And they found a program and people who could help. And they were very good at this. And it took a lot of time and a lot of work for him to manage this problem. But he got a handle on it. And it's one of those things that it never goes away. It's always there. And you always have to be prepared for what you're going to say. Our president-elect is a stutterer. And he has learned how to manage that problem. There's a video where he is talking with a young boy who is a stutterer. And he helps him deal with this, and then they show this boy, who's I think 12, reading this thing that he's written. And it is so touching and powerful. Whether or not you voted for Joe Biden, whether or not you like him, he's got a heart, and he understands some things that we need to understand. There's compassion there. Anyway, he gets a handle on this problem, and he goes through school because he's brilliant, just a brilliant kid. Goes through school, goes through college. He's because of his love of animals, he goes into biology and zoology. He goes on to graduate school. He gets his PhD. And he is with a professor studying bears in the Appalachian Mountains. And the man asks him, how would you like to go to Belize and study jaguars and help set something up so that they can survive? Because we're running out of them. They're being killed. And he just, absolutely. He doesn't have any idea where Belize is, but he's going to go. And so he does, with a research team that he leads, and they live in the jungle. and they watch these cats, and they will capture them, and they'll take readings and record data and share it, and the work is going on, and it's wonderful work, but they're not saving the cats because they're still being killed. So he realizes he needs to do something more. He has to get some people on board, and so he makes an appointment somehow to speak to the president. And he's given 5 minutes to speak to the president of Belize and some of his cabinet to explain what they're trying to do and to win them over. Now, you can imagine how stressful it would be just for someone who speaks easily, for someone who stutters and who isn't all that good at talking to people, but he does it, and he succeeds. And they create this program, and they fund it, and start these areas where the cats are protected, and it's a successful program. And he travels around the world, and he does this in other places for other large predators in other countries in the world, and he's still doing this work. But he keeps coming back to Belize, living in the jungle and doing this research, studying these cats. Well, one day, he's out in the jungle, and he sees these prints that have to be the prints of a jaguar. And they're the largest prints he has ever seen. It's got to be a huge male. So he follows the tracks. And he is so enthralled by this search that he loses track of time. He knows the jungle, but time just sort of evaporates. And suddenly he realizes the sun is low, and it's going to go down very soon. And he doesn't want to be out in the jungle by himself. He needs to get back to his camp. So he turns around to go back, and there, just yards away from him, is this huge, gorgeous jaguar. It's the one he thought he was following. It's watching him. At some point, it realized it was being followed, and it silently circled back around behind him and has been following and watching him. He doesn't have any idea how long. And he gets down low so that he's not a threat to this cat, and he just looks at him. They look at each other for this moment, this long moment, and he sees in this cat's eyes the fire of this wild, wonderful, magnificent life. And he's just thrilled and remembers the promise that he made to that jaguar in the zoo and realizes he has come full circle as well. It's such a beautiful story, such a wonderful thing. So what? Should I just quit with the story? So maybe this. Alan thought he was the observer, that he was in control of the situation, that he was tracking this cat. And he found out that it was the other way around. And he realized that what he sought was right there. What he was looking for was right there, but all he had to do was stop and turn around and see. Now, the story in Matthew gives us the impression, perhaps, that we are managing this thing, and that if we have enough stuff, the right stuff, we're on God's track, on God's trail. We'll track God down, or if we stay where we are, wait long enough with enough stuff, and are patient enough, and plan well enough, and prepare well enough, we will get what we want. We'll get in by our own means. We'll achieve our ends by our own means. But how much is enough? And how do we know? And how long do we have to figure it out? Could it be that God is waiting for us to simply stop and turn around and realize that there is more than enough already? And that it's all right here, and it surrounds us. We are in the midst of it all, and that we are already in. We are already in by virtue of the fact that we are. That we are. That we are in Christ. Amen.